The deadline issued by U.S. President Donald Trump to China to remove its retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods has passed without any action by China. Trump had threatened to place an additional 50% tariff on imports from China. But China's Ministry of Commerce called the new U.S. tariffs bullying and said it would fight to the end, with Beijing promising countermeasures. Trump says he imposed the tariffs to correct what he calls unfair trade practices. Now, in February, he imposed a 10% tariff on all Chinese goods, which was doubled to 20% in March. Last week, he announced another 34% to take effect on Thursday, April 9th. Trump threatened that additional 50% levy if China didn't rescind reciprocal tariffs of its own, bringing total U.S. taxes on Chinese imports to a whopping 104%. And the 9th is, of course, Wednesday, not Thursday. For more, I'm joined now by Meredith Crowley. She's a professor of economics at the University of Cambridge in the UK. Good to have you with us. Now, Trump and Xi are playing hardball here, but how long can they keep it up? How much further can they escalate this?
So at some level, once you hit tariffs of about 100%, those tariffs essentially become prohibitive. And so there's really, in most cases, we wouldn't expect the exporter to want to continue exporting, because if you have a 100% tariff, essentially you're going to lose your customer base in the United States or in China on the export side. So I think, there's really not much higher you can go than 100%. More generally, there's a question of which country has more economic power, and would one country back down first and, want to move towards some sort of negotiated solution. My sense is that while the United States has, in this case, more economic power because the U.S. imports more from China than China does from the U.S., I think the Chinese feel very much that this is a sort of bullying situation. And in terms of the perception of their domestic constituents, how it would look if they reduce their tariffs and, give the sort of perception that they're buckling to U.S. pressure, that could be damaging for them politically. So I think the Chinese are in a weak position in that now that they've ratcheted up their rhetoric, it's going to be hard to back down until maybe the U.S., offers an olive branch.
It does feel like this is just the beginning, though, right? So I'd like to look at what this is going to mean for ordinary people. Who's going to be hit harder here, consumers and workers in the U.S. or in China?
In terms of which one would be hit harder, I think in the first pass, there's two different sides to this. On the American side, we already had substantial tariffs on a lot of things like clothing, kids' shoes, all types of consumer goods. So a lot of that cost had already passed through to U.S. consumers with the first round of Trump tariffs. People generally on lower incomes, the bottom 20% of the income distribution, are more hard hit by tariffs than, say, an income tax, because they spend more of their income on material goods like paper plates or clothing or shoes. On the Chinese side, China tends to not import, the consumers don't import as many foreign varieties as I think we would see in the United States case. So I think on the Chinese side, a lot of ordinary, consumer goods like clothing are probably produced in China anyway. So that cost probably won't, push forward to consumers. On the Chinese side, I think the bigger worry is in employment.
Yeah.
And essentially, with this reduction in production associated with U.S. tariffs, people are going to be losing their jobs. And that's going to be where the tariffs will bite on the Chinese side.
Jobs were precisely the reason Trump started all of this. He promised to bring jobs back to America, but bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. is easier said than done, isn't it? How does he expect this to work, and in what time frame?
So he wants this symbolic victory of moving manufacturing back into the United States. I think something that's escaped him, since going all the way back to 2018, is that if we look at the history of U.S. employment and manufacturing going back to, say, 1980, every time the U.S. has a big recession, we lay off a lot of workers, our investment rises, we invest in new capacity, machinery, et cetera, and US productivity rises because over, the last, say, 60 years, the US has continually invested in productivity, which means reducing the labor share in manufacturing, in manufacturing. So manufacturing output in the US grows, but the share of employment in manufacturing declines. So realistically, wages in the US are very high. They're among the highest in the world. And so if companies want to invest in the United States to expand production, they're going to do it in the most labor-saving, efficient way possible. So that means if you build a big factory, you're going to try to hire a lot of robots rather than humans, and as few humans
and
as
Trump's
possible.
Secretary of Commerce has already hinted at that. That was Meredith Crowley from the University of Cambridge. Thank you so much for all of that, Meredith.